Sheila here with Sirius Dallas Moon. This is Jupiter, our Jupiter day. And look at the stellium in Pisces. Now, the reason I don't get my Let's Make a Venus talisman right now is because Mercury is 18 degrees. So this is my point of caution. However, for those of you who would want to try to refer to that Mercury 18 degrees and um, address address it talismanically, then I would not outrule that. I just already did a couple of talismans um, and woke up with all of my noses. So I was incredibly synced with Sphere and Sundry, and they have a new product um, that, to be very frankly, Austin was telling me yesterday. So, so the energy went right. We never had a conversation in. But today I see this product as I was making the talisman. And by the way, I did just make classic, Caitlin related stuff, which is body butters and stuff like that I learned to make as aromatherapist. And then it was the idea of to activate the talisman. So Sphere and Sundry will be having on the 26th of February a meditation. Now, this is a sort of hypnotic meditation. I understand that Caitlin has a certification in that. Um, they claim not to have any MK Ultra, MK Often related stuff. They don't name it in that name, and it is pinpointed to have um, to attune to the frequency of relationships. They're going to use one of the elections that I used to make talismans separately. Um, I probably won't be able to make it to the 26th live. Um, I think we did understand something that was arising um, in those meditations. So I ran into Sphere and Sundry through the Astrology podcast, and it was one sudden day I was in my bed, and then I was just watching the podcast. Then an energy came to my room, um, very, uh, um, very fascinating and weird things conjoined that. Some of them were related to MK Ultra and MK Often. Some of them were authentic healing. Some of them made me wonder, is it the technique of creation of trauma bond? Um, is it something that came in mind control? And is it even real? Because I was just taking a break from attempting to heal myself and having my psychologist done, basically being mind controlled by some sort of Epstein ring. Um, so that was all very scary. And with the years, as I began to address that, I was called to make talismans myself. It was like I was really called to the art. And I even separated um, a decade-long friendship um, with someone that was also susceptible to that mind control campaigns that went on relationships with Uranus and Taurus. Um, so a lot of things, and as a relational, uh, I haven't done relational astrology in a while, but as a relational astrologer, I always look at Uranus because usually relationships in this world or in this economy, relationships usually don't come as, it's the high school sweetheart that are celebrating their 50th anniversary usually don't come to be relationship consultants. It's usually the things gone wrong, and what is the holistic picture of those things gone wrong. So Sphere and Sundry will be having this hypnotic session that is supposed to not contain MK Often, that is zero trafficking, zero rape, um, suggestions. Again, I cannot ascertain for that, but that is definitely the intention For that, it's going to be on the 26th. Sphere and Sundry's page. I got this calling to take a look at that product, and you know me, immediately I was like, is this thing going to be infused with some, what's their name? The church of the one that Tom Cruise went to. No, you're not getting away with me. Is this some kind of a, how do they call them? The one that the Tom Cruise was with. The people that escaped the Masons, they were escaping to that. So first of all, that's the date. No, you're not getting away with it. I have to talk about this. You know that if I'm called to talk about this, I will address this. Scientology. And because Scientology, for example, I went to EMDR and I wasn't told that EMDR is associated with Scientology. Um, I was not a member of the Scientology, but this is something actually a person that was affected. Um, yeah, that was Chris Red that was affected by the ritual. It was satanic ritual in 2007. We had a friend, Alicia, in Hollywood, and she was in Scientology, and Chris warned me about it. And so, while Chris was violating my boundaries in a way that would need a decade, 2 decades to even begin to recover from, but this was also because of the susceptibility to those rituals, to those mind control rituals, to those ritual and often Masonic and Scientology rituals. So, so this is where I already am in the order page, but this is basically what they promise not to include there. And this is any type of self-promotion, sexually oriented suggestion, which one might find objectable. So basically, trafficking. Um, and subliminal messages that one cannot decipher. This already sounds like a good standard to begin with, um, and something that could create an alternative. Again, myself, I will probably join into the after recording, so I will probably purchase the recording on March. Um, but that's something um, that I think is very called for at this day and time. As I understood, if I understood correctly from Austin, and he received my energy through such meditations, and that explains a lot, because it would also explains what there would be the attempts to infiltrate or to mind control, even practitioners. Um, so again, I cannot. It's not Austin approved. It's an attempt to communicate in energy. Um, but I want to talk about Uranus. So this is just a shout out to Sphere and Sundry. It's not an affiliated link. I'm not monetizing my channel at this point, or any such thing. Um, Not in the usual way. I mean, if people want to send me coffee, rice, and sushi, it's all well accepted. But other than that, or I don't know, this mental concentration camps. I think that would be the best currency right now. Following the previous episode, great attunement, and I want to talk about Uranus, because Uranus at the end of Taurus is Uranus at the end of revolutionizing our relationships, and this is where my perspective comes into play. So, of course, I was benefited from that energy, and perhaps this episode will be people testing testing to see what happened, how she's in the aftermath. Um, well, Uranus and astrology. The way I see Uranus in relational settings is, first of all, Uranus is involved with astrology. So in 2007, I had a friend that was studying in Heidelberg, and she let me know about the Astro.com. So there was this horrible ritual of the red shoes thingy, and the way that I got into relational astrology was actually after the interaction with Chris Red, and I said, that dumb fuckery cannot be anymore. No doctors, no psychologists, no therapists. Nothing worked. And I didn't understand what happened. And and then the lady says, "You have this moon, you have this, that, you have this, that." And I'm like, okay, how do I avoid such connections? And then I went into Uranus and I said, well, it changes something in a society. And I was completely dissociated. I was trying to understand what's the meaning. In fact, years after, through omens of the Saraswati and Timamundi, I would understand that there was a red shoe ritual at the time of the kidnapping of Madeleine, and Shred lived in St. Ilgen, which was next to Heidelberg, where they kidnapped Madeleine, at the time where we were interacting. So that was something that me dealing with the aftermath, which was, it was basically a form of um, it is spiritual rape in the form of trying to program, and and this is where I was exposed to something that used what I now know is misplaced arousal, and it exposed the fact that somehow I was preconditioned to that, and it of course created havoc, life-risking havoc on everyone, for which I blamed in the beginning. I didn't blame. I was trying to see how can we prevent that, because I saw that something was off, but I did not know it's connected to the bigger ritual. Was a member of secret society. Usually, the people that do initiations, they don't ask people. There are campaigns, and there are orders where people go to physically and so on and so forth. But there are also other types of settings where they try to involuntarily initiate people or recruit people, and they don't actually talk about it. And those things are, of course, Epstein ring, intelligence affiliated. And there was another campaign to try to make me religious at that time. Um, and it was, I don't even know if it was another campaign. Okay, it was the Epstein ring operating with their dark occult, and I did not know that. So now I understand that Uranus, okay, that was basically coming to liberate. I don't have a clear synastry, and I don't address in the open synastries that I wasn't given an option to, that I wasn't, how should I say it? If I did not discuss that with that person, I'm not going to address any synastry. Um, and so this is where um, this is where basically the Uranus operating there, I think, was still in my 12th house. And then I discovered astrology as a necessity. So Pluto was about my midheaven. And then I was also traveling. I was called to travel to Europe. Um, Pluto was around my midheaven, and um, and this would be the beginning of the journey. When Uranus would cross my ascendant, then I would look into astrology as a tool of healing. Um, and then when Neptune crossed my midheaven, I would get this calling from what I now understand is Austin authentically, to do astrological magic. And I separated from a decade-long relation where that person was too religious for. He was not religious; he was secular, but the religious were beginning to affect him, and then they tried to make me religious. Um, but there was also something probably that Sphere and Sundry has been dealing with. Um, there are many things, okay, whether it's weapon trade, whether it's human trafficking, organ harvesting, that are happening in the world, and they usually use dissociation. So this product is very connected to what I'm going to talk about, which is Uranus in Taurus. And Uranus in Taurus comes to liberate something that's connected to societal changing times. It is involved in a lot of unregulated relational patterns that come to liberate us from. And in the Deacon of Spirit and Matter, it is anything that would use even hypnosis, psychosis, um, disorientation to try to traffic, to try to rape and claim that something was cheating, to try to use programming of the sexuality. And now again, such things can be used as hypnosis as an antidote, and hypnosis as something that violates sovereignty. Um, and this is where um, the relationships that are going through transformations are basically coming to liberate us from NK often trafficking, organ harvesting campaigns that are affiliated with Epstein Peter rings. I said what I said. I asked in spirit, do you want me to give a shout out? He said, yeah, we do. I said, you know that I'm troubles. You know that I speak. um, and this is where um, that Uranus is, and the relations that are unfolding right now, whether it's um, whether it is basically, I was told chemical castrations, okay, the use of psychiatry is chemical castration, okay, which is because, here's the thing, because the occult was by rape in order to harvest life energy, destinies, and so on and so forth. The antidote is embodied tantric sensuality that is heart and soul aligned and sense of self in the body. Now, some of the people that are going to be the clients of or affiliated have been in Epstein lists, okay? They have been raping children. They have been raping children believing that they are having unusual healing experiences with one another, okay? The really convoluted stuff. This is what Uranus at the end of Taurus is coming to liberate us from. And this is essential to antidote everything that we see in the world, because where that gone wrong, this is where the policies and extortion to make concentration camps, slavery, depopulation, and genocide came from. Basically, what the campaigns that they tried to do on me and people like Chris Red and many other people in 2007 were attempt to get us to be the Epstein list. Was attempt to get me under a guise of some sort of rabbinical whatnot, be a child trafficker. Okay, I was already then. I'm 41 now. Already then in my 20s. Probably they weren't interested in me for anything other than to try to harvest energy. Now, and this is where Uranus itself has to do with astrology, has to do, it is Kundalini rise, and in Kundalini rise, we are called to do. By the way, me and Caitlin has Moon, Rahu approaching my ascendant. And Austin has the Sun, I think Juno, and Mars there. And I was called to look at his chart back during COVID, because they were telling all their placements, and I literally received a calling to look at the chart. Um, so, and this is just how those things would operate, because through Austin I know about Caitlin's friend Sundry, um, and I was like, what is this? What is this thing? It sounds very interesting. And of course, omens began to arrive, and I was receiving kind of premonitions before every launch, which is a part of the launching, is a part of the marketing. But this is where the discussion, something came into discussion that wasn't talked about before. At about that time, I was just at the end of my work on a kind of this JDAG business that was promoting attunement to our sensuality and preventing sexual trauma from even self pleasure. And I began to notice what. Actually, I heard it first from Hans Medem, who called his wife a whore, which is which shows how he was not yet getting to the nitty gritty of that. But they were, um, but they were raping and programming people um, to basically have misplaced arousal, and that was the grand missing of relaxed arousal. And then to achieve that, also our non-erotic needs are being and need to be met adaptively. And this is also the cure to what would later, in great convolutions, create pedophilia. So for me, there was a time when I was going to therapy that I felt uncomfortable around children, um, but I did not feel attraction to children. I felt uncomfortable around children, and I felt uncomfortable around people in general. And there was attempt to. I remember I was doing doggy sitting. It was this picture I was taking, and that was picture that was, I think, eroticized programming that I didn't get. And then there was another time when I moved, and it was a picture of me and a cat, not of me, of a cat, and that cat. There was something that was eroticizing the cat. Um, and this is a part of what these people do, is basically they try to create anomalies in sexuality in order to create extortion cults, and they do this by preventing the meeting of to fully meet our needs as secure attachment. So, and then they have to provide healing. So I think it's also people competing on the consciousness of people to try to heal and recover, and people try to corrupt the healing and recovery. Um, I remember when I had a cat and she had a moon in Capricorn, so I was really working on that as somebody reached me through energy to meet my non-erotic needs, and that helped later how I would feel around children. So I began to feel more embodied, and then I would continuously attempt to corrupt that and torture, psychic torture, and so on and so forth. Attempts to sacrifice me by my own communities, um, and I noticed that those attempts were affecting astrology community as well. So this is a very, very intense issue. Um, and a lot of what people think is cheating or third party is emanating from that. And so my response was always there were consecutive attempts to bring me, because I wasn't dating people, there were consecutive attempts to bring me into um, type of triangulation settings. And time again, I would, if this was through the man, that I would could contact the spouse and expose that. Um, okay, and so on and so forth. And and then I try to think, okay, what's underneath? So as a relational astrologer, I knew Uranus as, okay, what are we coming to liberate? For example, if I begin to do astrological talismans, it's obvious that I was called to do that. And Uranus is Kundalini rise. But then with the last decan of Uranus, I realized that it's liberating from the core thing that created cloning, Epstein's, and Detrus. There's no way around this. And basically, it's liberating from the thing that creates world wars. Uh, Now, and this is, okay, zero rape, zero slavery society, not the image of, but the real deal. There's no sovereignty without zero rape, zero slavery, because those things are acting to violate. Slavery is like, it's obvious. But I think that people are not aware that attempts to sexually program one through decentering them and trying to make them even to apply to their pleasure senses, but in a way that is uh, um, detouring sovereignty, and then to try to use that to siphon energy or to create something that they didn't consent to be created with their energy. Um, Now, here's the thing: during torture, the sense of self is fragmented, and this is where people could see. This is why I was being extremely cautious, because this is why people could see one being taking the entity of another being to rape someone or to torture someone, and that is not the actual person doing that consciously, but actually the person being tortured out of existence, and then their consciousness is literally being worn as an energy with which somebody masquerades their attacks. And so this is why when it comes to the energy, unless I was attacked by someone that clearly threatened my life in treaty, then I don't associate that with. And this is why I was being extremely cautious um, before speaking about anything, um, so that I will not blame. Even when it came to what looks like cheating, I was like, wait a second, something's going on here. If I didn't know a person, or I only saw them, I don't know, on a podcast, not even just not even having anything activated, particularly in this type of setting, and it's something. I'm saying, is this that person? Is this somebody trying to communicate me as that person? I see that there is a trafficking agenda with that. What the heck is going on? And as I listen to people like Douglas McIntyre, people like Alandra, people like Annika Lucas, I began to be more informed that I crossed the threshold of success, and I was expected to be extortable. And I take that as an opportunity to dismantle extortion codes and remediate the core of extortion, which basically the torture that was placed on people to make them pedophiles and so on and so forth. And I take use of the privilege that I got the healing and prevention on time. I was exposed to that programming to not become compliant with that, not even as a third party. And the opportunities are knocking on the door. Okay, when world astrologers are knocking on the door, when I'm making a talisman, the opportunities are they're not just knocking on the door. They're and and it was important to me to set. It's not to set this standard because of being better or less than. It's because if it's important to me, there's something predictive about it. What I have a lot of divination, 29 degrees, ninth house Scorpio. Second house is Aries, which is house of values, is sovereignty, and is ruled by 22 Mars, that rules over Pluto, Neptune, and except for Uranus, so over and Uranus, because I have natal Uranus in Sagittarius, and Aries, and so Mars ruling over my lot of divination, world degree, not world, world related affairs, world wars, what the wars are about. So I understand what values are people fighting about, just as I understand it's, well, it's rare earth minerals, and the consciousness and energy siphoning through, let's say, rape and stuff. Then I understand that this war is about sexual sovereignty in the level of sense of self, and I can predict that value will be fought about. So this is where I'm on the money on so various ways, because I understand that those that get that now are going to be less susceptible to extortion, even if they were extorted in the past. And if we dismantle that, then we dismantle psychopathy and we dismantle pedophilia from the core. It's a very unique, basically it's tapping to not just what the Frank Olsons and the MK Ultra and MK Ultras were doing, but something that really is on a 12 millennial level now. I do have Sedna conjoining Venus. Sedna is a 12 millennia cycle that's to do with trafficking, and Venus is values. So I'm on the money on so many levels. I have asteroid Fairbanks connected to that. This is why I'm at the juncture where I'm not seeking judgment and blame, but I'm seeking to deliver that opportunity and to prepare for the world that is sovereign. Now, a lot of what Uranus in Taurus is doing is, if I'm somehow in your life or in your energy, then this is what this thing is about. My Uranus is natally in Sagittarius, middle decan, and this is about it's about parents, it's about belief systems, it's about astrology and science itself. Jupiter is the middle decan of Capricorn, which is the prepper's decan. So prepare what would be the future. How would people view the world in several centuries? Um, and the ruler of the ruler is in the middle decan of Scorpio, which my poor mother has a son in. um, so this is a Neptune-related decan of Scorpio, which sets boundaries to the. I know it from the Detru ring, the programming, because Detru used to kidnap children, and he would make even children would need to kidnap children. I just saw this 60s article about how people in their 60s and 70s grew resilience and so on and so forth. That's the time where young Marc Dutroux was assigned to kidnap children, probably even as a child. So, okay, and the parents that told their children, "Hey, go play outside, come back for dinner." There's a lot of beauty in that, but there is also a lot of susceptibility in that, with children going missing that we didn't see, because that was one case, but there were also the cases like Teal Swan, where children literally had double life. A lot of people from that era, and a lot of people from my era of millennials, would have basically dissociation. Um, and this is something with Peggy Van Roy, we say that I try to donate to Ramstag's podcast. Um, and there was an attempt to target my credit card, not by her, not by her at all. And by the way, I was shown by who? I'm not saying that because I tend to the core issue. Um, but this is, and the core issue is the creation of extortion. One of the people that begins to tend, that was also seeing things and beginning to tend to recovering or the opportunity of recovering pedophiles was Prime Minister Maloney. And here is the thing. Of course, politics before the exposure of Epstein list, even in Detroit had Michel Nihoul. And I was joking about it as Saint Michel, because he was covering for people that would grow people in extortion settings, which they only could survive if they would commit treason in everyone. And this is what Uranus is coming to liberate right now, relational. Because relations could only be based on trauma bonds. And so, yeah. If I think about Sphere and Sundry, Caitlin has Saturn, Uranus in my next to my midheaven. And I have in the middle decan, so that would be her second house. Austin, Uranus in my ninth house. um, which is worldview, and also weapon trade. The use of MK, often MK Ultra, weaponizing of the subconscious, because for me it would be ruling Uranus, and of course real estate, because it's a Uranus Mars. And I have, yeah, so for my Uranus, it would be the sixth house of labor. One of our major argument was about work before the birth of Lucian, and who would have Uranus in Taurus. And I think even in the spirit of matter, Deacon. So, and this was the time where Sphere and Sundry was growing to be world renowned business, where that Deacon would be important. So it's so that Lucian will not have to be Epstein or Detru. And this is where I caught myself speaking like never before. I'm 41 years old. I have no children. I was just turning to my own inner child, and I caught myself speaking like a lioness, risking everything because well, my senses were like, yeah, Lucian would have Sun around my ascendant and Jupiter around my Sun. So, again, I haven't delineated, I haven't made it a chart. It's kind of like thinking about the constellation. But if I think about how this Uranus relations, okay, with Sphere and Sundry, which is talismanic business around my midheaven, and Saturn is something, is a must, is a karma. It's like I must do talismans. And then when I was working with Tema Mundi, then I was basically approaching charts of okay, world astrology and so on and so forth. Um, and then I would meet the Uranus in my seventh house again, which I met also in academia. And here's the thing: some of the charts that I mentioned, even in this channel, may have been in both Detru and Epstein affiliated. They could have not be. But what would curate from that is what would dismantle extortion, and this is zero rape, zero slavery, but also healing trauma bonds and the sexuality and mind control that they create. So basically healing from ritual abuse. That I got, that is why I speak. And this is where understanding what is coming to be liberated is um, is key to addressing relational issues that are destroyed by Uranus. And that can be something that here it can be something that somebody would think it was third party, but it was a trafficking scam. Now, because those things happen with mind control, and because usually the person is set out to, whether it's attuned to planetary energy, attuned to spiritual spiritual work, and this is where there would be attempts to corrupt that attunement. This is also why I agreed to give the shout out to Sphere and Sundry, because I was called to look at it and I was like, "You want me to give a shout out? You know what happens when I speak? Okay." So this is if there are any people that are watchers or remediators, then they are to blame. Okay, and so this is where, yes. And this is, and here's the thing. Let me share with you the things that I was thinking. Because at the beginning, I was looking at this, although I energetically received that from Austin. Um, Austin is such a great at marketing that for a while, Caitlin had a problem that her business was known by Austin, and he constantly markets his wife. So his wife's business. Oh my God! I hope I didn't run into something. Volkan, if I ran into something, if this was a lapsus, then Like, if this was a lapsus, then you're dead. Not that I have any means to kill anybody, but but here is the thing. One of my reservations was, wait a second. I learned about ritual abuse. I know that in the communities of certain echelons, and Caitlin actually addressed that in a way because she talked about in one of her interviews. Um, she doesn't have many, and she talked about um, the fact that she came from people that had money, and and she said that money did not make them better people. Now, my perception on wealth, because I'm a millennial and I was not growing in high society. I mean, I was going to the schools that they were that a lot of them were going. Um, Something that I probably should need to dedicate an entire episode to, but it's true. I obviously need to dedicate an entire episode to that. This will be my next episode, but this is, and remind me in the comments if I didn't talk about this. I was living at my mother with my grandmother to study at a public school. Now my grandmother was working class to a place where the elite class was living, and in the school, it was Oil Shem School, and I actually had a Dutch person coming to take a look with me what was at the school because there was programming there, um, and I was in dissociation um, when I saw that school. I think I broadcasted from there, um, and he was coming from the area of Den Bosch. Um, so yeah, there was a shit ton of things. And by the way, they were addressing satanic panic when I was in high school. There was a satanic ritual abuse. I knew about animals, but I was in high school, and I didn't like. There was just wondering if are there people at school doing that, but that was where it ended. And and yeah, I was not too close to anyone. Um, and so immediately I knew that something was protecting me heavily. Um, I was way in suicide ideation back then, so to detour, um, let's say psychiatry, then I was somebody recommended my parent to just declare me being religious, which gave me kind of the detour. And then indeed, I did not work Saturdays. I gave up the income of double income on Saturdays, and it was meeting me um, with labor rights. So I was like, okay, it doesn't have to be Saturday, but I'm very good with having a day off and not to work 24/7 and so on and so forth. From the human rights perspective, and there was this overlap. And then I, of course, began to look at to reread um, a lot. I think I read the entire Bible because of like, hey, if that is playing certain role of saving me from something that would be that could subject me to obeying illegal orders, then I knew that I don't want to be a Nazi in high school, but I couldn't say it. And when I say Nazi, I mean the infiltration of all militaries around the world, including Hamas. Um, this is why Hamas is not a liberation. It's not even guerrilla because it rapes, and what rapes cannot yield sovereignty. What abolishes rape yields sovereignty, and this is why they're building concentration camp in Rafah right now. So, so I hope that I managed to demonstrate how do these things work from the creation of, and how important, because it seemed before that it was like, oh, will and consent is kind of like a thing that even my parents, like, when my mother had me, was it the embodied and so on and so? Probably not. She still cared to have a child from love. She still cared to marry from love and not have children outside of love. She still saw the problem around that. And then, of course, her daughter is 7 times worse. And 10 times more attuned. Um, So I was on the money back in 2007. I saw that there's some intelligence to do with sexuality that's to do with relational. Um, and this is exactly why, if I was showing up for meditation to anybody at the Kapuk family, then that's why. That's what I come to liberate. Um, so I was seeing wealth as sovereign sensual embodiment that meets the erotic and unerotic needs adaptively. And this is the upside down of how they practice that in Masonic orders, cults of personality, and so on and so forth, or Scientology for that record. All of them practice healing, but all of them use healing as a bait to maintain trauma bond, and that maintains the sexual anomalies. It's not sexual anomalies, it's basically interference in Kundalini energy. So basically, what happens to me at the time with Chris Reddy was violating my sexual boundaries. I was trying to explain to him that he thought he was misleading me relationally, and I'm like, no, I was. And I'm like, no, that the issue is that was not loving, and then he got seriously offended. And again, I'm not saying that as blaming. Okay, please understand that. I'm not seeking that he will be jailed or something like that. No, not at all. I'm saying that as that was something that through consciousness alternation, whether it's the alcohol and the ritual that was done in Heidelberg as well at that time, um, and the rituals that were done in Israel at that time, that was affecting many things. And once that was violated, I began to be very violent. And then I noticed that I began to set boundaries in fierce violence. Even my mother was scared of me. And somehow it made me completely suicidal, and eventually in the subprime crisis I would get funding for my degree because I was in debt, because I was trying some sort of I think it was VIPAX. It was I don't know if it was SSRI based, but those things caused excess spending, and and I was constantly trying to find the sensuality or the sexuality that I do want, because uh, Gnostically, in terms of gnosis, I knew that sexuality is sacred and pure, not from a religious point of view, but it's kind of like it's love. It's life energy and it's love. So life energy is love, and sexuality is love. So why do people make it such a violent thing? And it is because they try to hoard power through their traumas. So basically, kind of like everybody's traumatized out there, and everybody's seeking excess power and fearing sovereignty and letting go, and it's affecting everyone's relationships. So they also try with the Mangele twins. They also try, and that was yesterday, my thing. Now here's the thing: Caitlin has round moon next to my ascendant, means that as she was becoming a mother, moon, and doing Tima Mundi, moon, she was becoming closer and closer to me. And my ascendant ruler is in the 11th house of dreams and goals, and so it kind of looked like everything that I think about, Caitlin thinks about. Everything that Caitlin thinks about, I was thinking about. I was like, I was consecrating a ring with a peridot, and I was tending to that because I heard Caitlin saying, like, wait, isn't this idea recycled? Like, kind of like, why don't you make it your own? I'm like, darling. Hello? It's like twins, and then I was like, wait a second. Just the way I bought this ring with not a Peter ring, not a human trafficking ring, and like not Mangele twins, because both in my age and with people that have Gemini 8th house, there could be birth of twins. And I know that the doppelganger and the cloning, they do a lot of experiments on twins. I suspect that they did that also in spirit. And this is where I have a male self and a woman self. And I don't know if this is really being to spirit, or if there is some sort of a Mangele twin, quantum entangled through psychic ritual abuse around birth when I was born or when I was a child, because it's not like it wasn't done by my mother, so I don't know. Okay, and they do all kinds of weird things in spirit. So again, this is what my can only speak for what this is what my side of the globe received from the energy communication. Um, and by the way, I have Chiron in Gemini, and my challenges in communication. Sometimes I can be really clear and eloquent, also with numerics, and sometimes I'm simply impossible. It's that neurodivergence is basically the wound of communication that's created around the Mengele twins experiment, which was created by the rape and cloning thingy. And so here's the thing. It's about just like a Rothschild family had an entire segment of inbreeding and then entire segment of not inbreeding. This is another thing where at the end of Aries in Aries, we see the results of the human experiments, and we see that, um, well, definitely knowing about secure attachment is important, and definitely understanding that sexual sovereignty is a big issue that we cannot give up on when we want any type of sovereignty. And this is why, for example, Hamas is not a liberation front, and it yielded the concentration camp because it was not insisting on zero rape. However, the wealth is in zero rape, zero slavery society. They try to rape to get the life energy and the wealth, but it's always creating perpetual war state and perpetual bubbles that affect everyone. And I think this is the one where they're going to affect everyone because they try to fool everyone. And this is where, this is why this is kind of like nothing has to happen, but this could be war that's very, very big, more than we've known, on this very particular thing that has to do also with martial arts and military and security and defense, because we cannot protect security by rape. We had myths of espionages that do not receive cohesive, true information. And a lot of people are like, how come you know? How come you know? Because there were attempts at me, and I consistently insist on secure attachment, zero rape, zero slavery. And this is how come I know. This is how come I know so much so that. And also, I don't seek name hunting. I seek tending to the core issue and remediating that, which is why I speak, because I don't say, okay, let's say, I don't know, this person was affiliated with that petering and was doing this, I don't know, organ harvesting and so on and so forth. Like, okay, the thing that created that is what I'm talking about. The cure to that is secure attachment and meeting our non-erotic needs adaptively and so on and so forth. And once that is cured, the people that willing to be curated, when that is accessible, we cannot predict how many of them would actually want and authentically be able to be curated. So we will have sovereignty-based economy and not rape-based and slavery-based economy, and religion and spirituality and sociology and so on and so forth, and intimate life. And this is where I talk about the core issue. And this also allows me to really address the things in the core issue and to really address that alignment, and be supported, because that's just the way it is. Okay, the people that are subjected to be extorted, they care to not be extorted for something that they never really got the access to heal from. The people that are owning the extortion cults, they care to know how will the world be seen in so and so centuries, so that they can adapt to the changing values, because none of them grew even being aware of that. when the Me Too came about, I said 2 years I didn't speak with my mom because she was seeing this president, I don't know, being accused in sexual harassment, and she said, yes, all these, whores, prostitutes are coming to get move forward through the panties and so on and so forth. Well, her daughter was saying no to world-related opportunities, whether it's Harvard. I had recommendation for MIT, which was supposed to be in conjoint with Harvard. My thesis was studying also related to studies in placebo that were done in Harvard. I was the 1%, okay? I was the 1% of class mobility that they were capitalizing on to enable their whatever, whether it's American dream or rags to riches. So I was in that privileged position, and to use that privilege to change the core systems. And this is where I had to say no to a lot of things because they wouldn't tell me being an Epstein. And the minute most people, whether it's parents or not, they try to talk to them about it. Yeah. It's like, no, it's not. Even when I talked to Chris Shred, it was like, yeah. You're not bullshitting, but here's the thing: I'm not ready to hear that. It's too much. It's too much. Because I was like, I wasn't saying to him, you raped as now you need to sit in prison for like, hey, you did that thing. That thing is a sexual boundary violation. So that he wouldn't do that anymore. But what was creating that was mind control, was torture, probably ritual abuse. And and this is where those things are really challenging the core issues, but we will not be able to keep children from being kidnapped by raising them to think that the 60s and the 70s were growing resilience when children are mind controlled to kidnap other children and bring them, because each child had to kill a child that looks like them. Now, Uranus hasn't Gemini yet. Okay. Um, but it was around this time, and Uranus delved to Gemini was the Mangele twins. By the way, the song that I didn't record was the "Let's Do It" or "Let's Make a World War," and there was a line there about the folks in Siam do it. Think of Mengele's twins, and um, yeah, it was basically a joke about the Nazis that people don't normally think of as the Nazis that created the World War. And they were all paper clips. The Nazis were looted. Okay? They weren't looting the Nazis for gold. The Nazis were the gold. And this was the Dr. Mengele's in the paper clip. Um, and those, I know in Israel now there was big scandals in the fifth house. So Israel is Aquarius fifth house. And there are probably many more child experiments than we know of that are happening there. Um, the guy that said that we are a villa in the jungle uh, was the jungle in the villa. And this is, and I have to share some of the experiences of tending to these topics was being taken through the emotional experiences of what it would be like to be in those Epstein lists. And this is where people are. Now here's the thing. Good relationship advice: always be with someone who supports your dreams and goals. Then